Mic check, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Hello. Welcome to the Sean and Sack Show. A little pre-introduction. We got the cameras rolling. We got the things going. We're on and live, guys. Welcome to the Sean and Sack Show. We're I don't know how to say it. You came up with this conversation last night.
I did,
and it's a good one. And I think it's a really great conversation. Sax and I had kind of a little insight, just to share a little backstory for 2 seconds on us and the podcast and the whole thing. Like, we realized that there's a really interesting dynamic of us sharing our story, and we started this podcast just to share our story and to just talk. It was a challenge. It was a real big challenge for Sax, because Sax is not a public speaker. She's married a guy who does that for a living and loves it, and she's terrified of it. And so one of the things that we started this podcast for was to really push ourselves. This is for you and I, like for us to level up, right? And I noticed, and this is just full transparency, like that sometimes we get a little bit coachy and we get a little bit preachy, and that's not what I ever want for this podcast. I want it to just be us, for us to share our world, our life, our lessons, our wins, our losses. There's lots of people out there. We do coaching, and so there's, we help people. And so there's a line of hey, we're just going to be on here spitting, preaching all day long, telling everybody what to do, versus, hey, here's what we're experiencing. Yeah. Is that, you know what I mean? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, and I find it because we're very passionate about a lot of the things we talk about. So it ends up in that, like, we really we care. Yeah. We want our people to win. And so it does end up preachy.
Sometimes. Yeah. And
so we're working on that.
Yeah, we're working on it. Look, this is a fucking work in progress, man. I mean, there aren't very many couples that have relationship podcasts or podcast periods. So like, this is a huge thing for us to do. But just in us talking about this conversation last night, I just told Sax, I'm like, look, I really love this podcast. It's stretched us. We're at 66 episodes? 67? Wow. 67 episodes, So that's a lot of time and a lot of hours, but we're getting better at it. And my point in saying this is that I want to really have us focus on sharing more of the intimate aspects of our life and our feelings and our emotions and where we are, versus it being like, hey, all right, we got this fucking shit figured out. Y'all got to go do this or you suck. You know what I mean? I mean, I'll probably still say that, but whatever. Anyways, so
it's because we love you.
Yeah, and we love us too. So I'll leave it at that. But hats off to people that are out there, to any of you that are out there that are putting yourself out there, because it's hard, man. It's hard in a lot of ways. And I don't want to sound like a victim or whatever, because I'm fucking not, because we've built ridiculous businesses and a brand, and it's really cool. But I also understand too that this conversation around relationships is very, very, very sacred to us. Yeah. It's a touchy subject, period. I mean, more marriages are failing than ever before. You figured out the stats the other day. It's 50% of marriages are ending in divorce, and 60 to 70% of second marriages end up in divorce. It's a staggering statistic. And this is not just what we're saying. This is what's happening. So we appreciate the opportunity that we have, and really the gift that we have to share this, but also the humility of knowing that, we want to give you guys what we set out to do, which is us. And some people say that's weird, it's odd, it's up, it's down. I don't really care. It's just, we're growing and expanding. And so I'm very much a believer of doing the things that help you continue to grow and expand. And if this podcast stretches you and I, even this dynamic of you and I learning about ourselves in not being preachy or this or that, but getting even deeper into our own rawness. If you guys are listening to this and you want to take a nugget from this, like, that's something that's huge. Like, us becoming self-aware through this podcast and going, we might be headed this direction. Like, let's go back this direction. Or I don't like how this vibes. Like, let's go here. It's a
that's
a huge thing,
That's part of the human experience.
Self-awareness is a big deal.
Yeah, and improving and fine tuning. So absolutely. So we just it was fine tuning it a bit.
Yeah. Anyway, so we really appreciate you guys, and we really appreciate the feedback, and we appreciate the opportunity we get to have these conversations and stretch ourselves, and obviously know that we touch a lot of people, and that's a cool thing for us. So,
absolutely.
So Zach sent me a text last night, and I'm just going to read it really quick, because this is what we wanted to talk about. She sent me a text from a screenshot of a lady who said, "You guys are amazing. Join the Lion's Den. So amazing. You guys are powerful." Sean says, "Get uncomfortable as fuck. Yep, do it and take your shot, and it works. You guys are killing it and so powerful. But not gonna lie, sometimes I ask questions and they seem like stupid questions and I'm shaking my head, but you guys offer a lot of great insight. And then you messaged me this, quote, judging others for their worst day compared to your best day. We all have some toxic side, a human side. It's in owning that humanness we truly can connect with our people. Savior complex or forgetting that your shit stinks too when comparing yourself to others or while even arguing only leads to disconnection. Reminder, compare your worst day with another worst day. Don't act like you're somehow exempt from that humanness, end quote. This is a great quote,
and this
babe.
was literally as my eyes were falling asleep in bed.
You were sober too.
Yeah.
You weren't even eating any cereal or anything
Sean
last
was
night.
in the bath and I was just about to go to sleep and I was like, oh, that's what I wanted to talk about.
And I think that's really good because it
well, this is one of the reasons it's kind of that was multifaceted, but one of the reasons is when we were going through our shit, like after a year of marriage, this is one thing that I found myself after doing a lot of work on myself was that I realized that I'm comparing, and I say compare, but we all do it.
Yeah, we totally do.
I can say, oh, we shouldn't compare. We all do it. It's just in our nature to compare, right? And so I found myself comparing or judging Sean on his worst day against my best day. And I did this in a way, it's like, I feel like we all kind of do it to be, I don't know if it's a self-preservation thing. I'm not really quite sure. But what I realized is I have worse days. And if I'm going to have this relationship or friendship with someone and I'm going around, well, somehow I'm superior to you, like I don't have that shitty day, it only causes disconnection because I am now selling myself a story that's not real based on whatever it is, whatever reason that I found that I needed to do that. And that gets us nowhere, right? And we need to have, it's like, I found that I needed to have compassion and empathy. The fact that my worst days can be really ugly.
Very.
Right? And your worst days.
On a scale of 1 to 10, they're 12s.
Are really ugly. This is not a fact. But, and it's like we've had the same conversation with friends and it's about as normal as anything else.
Yeah.
But for some reason, there's so much shame behind us, being able to acknowledge or admit that we have toxic behaviors. We have toxic traits, and yeah. So
everybody does.
Everyone does.
And I think that was something that, as I was thinking about this in the bath last night, we all compare, like you said, we do. Men do, women do. Men compare themselves, his car, my car, his bank account, my bank account, his private jet, my private jet, his watch collection, my watch collection, his body and physique, my body and physique. We all do. And any man who says that he doesn't is a fucking liar. Do you do it? Yes. Every single guy does. And I'd be willing to bet that every woman does too. You go to the gym, look at her cute workout clothes, and I need a thing like that, and her shoes and my shoes, and her bag and my bag, and that whole thing, right? I think that's very natural. I think one of the things, as I was thinking about this last night, we're living in a world and we're looking at the world in a lens of perfection, a lens of filters. Like we literally, there were no filters growing up. Like go look at old pictures when you were a kid. There were no filters. There wasn't like, it was like half the shots your eyes are closed because you had a Polaroid and you had a one take shit. You didn't get to adjust the filter or this or that, the other. It was like, yo, one shot, boom, here's what it is. Some of us had those old school cameras where they had the rolls of film where you had to open up the back, put the camera in, go 3 or 4 clicks, shut it, and then remember those cameras, right?
Yeah.
You didn't have the opportunity or the option to like adjust these things on the fly. It was like, this is the moment in time as it is in its realness. If your eyes are closed, if you look like a dork, it is what it is, right? Now we're living in this space where it's like, I can take 300 fucking pictures to take the one that looks exactly perfect, exact way that I want it. But the reality is the 299 before that were just as real as this one. I just chose to alter it, right?
Correct.
And so what's really interesting now is when we're raised, I mean, we were both raised fairly similar in, we didn't have a lot of love around us, not in a negative way, but we didn't have a lot of being built up with self-confidence and things along those lines. We had to find this on our own through a lot of trials, through a lot of errors. I mean, we had love. take that the wrong way. We had moms and dads. I mean, I know that my dad loved me at some point in time. I know that my mom still loves me tremendously, but understanding that some of these deeper dynamics of self-value, self-worth, being able to build yourself up, we've had to figure these out on our own, right? Sure. And so when you're looking at life, you're looking at other relationships, you're looking at other men, other women. The first thing that I really wanted to like say on this is like, it's normal. I think a lot of people look at us, we get comments all the time. Oh my God, you guys are great. You're great. We fight like fucking cats and dogs. We get after it. Like we get down hard. And when we go there, we're an all-in relationship. We fucking go to war. And would you agree with us? You're shaking your head, but people that are not watching, I want them to know that we're on the same page with this. Like we are very, very, very human in where we are, and knowing that we're far, far, far from perfect, because it doesn't exist.
I think, I was like,
it doesn't exist. But number two, we also are very raw in acknowledging like, look, we've figured out how to continue to win. Right now, along that path, you and I are learning ridiculous amounts of lessons, right? But we're also coming into this knowledge. And so like this text that you sent me last night, really thinking about it, I compare myself to dudes all the time. And I feel like, well, maybe they have it figured out and I don't have it figured out, or they're above or I'm below, or they're further and I'm here. And it's all a very relative reality, because I realize that my marriage is as good as it's ever been. I feel as confident as I've ever felt. I think you would probably agree with that. So as you step back and look through our lens, like our snapshot in time, our picture, this is what's real right now. This is what's happening right now. And I really hope people hear that, and pray that you hear that in a way where you realize like there are a lot of great nuggets out there in a lot of places that can help you. But so long as you're living through a lens of either contemplating, yesterday, before, or looking at it now saying, we're not enough, we're not good, you judging, me on the worst days or the best days. I think knowing, number one, that you have them is kind of a really powerful thing. And I think a husband and a wife knowing, hey, I have days where I just don't like you. I have days where I'm like, you know what? I love you. I'm committed to you, but I just can't stand even being in the same room. Like that's very real. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's a beautiful thing for people to step back and go, okay, cool. I'm seeing through all these pretty lenses, but this is truth. Everybody has this shit, right? And there's a lot of, one of your big words is grace. You love grace, right? I still am discovering that word. I'm still understanding the depth of it and what it means. But like giving yourself that grace to really know, okay, my partner's having one of those fucked days. I can judge. I can say, this shouldn't be this should be that, whatever. But I know that I have them and I'm real about it. So just holding that space. And I feel like if you start doing that with other people too, and really looking at your environment and your family and your friends and your kids. I mean, there's days where our kids, they're fucking amazing. They're great. Like they're huggy, they're lovey, they're snuggly. They're doing everything we ask them the first time we ask them. And then there's days where you're like, you're a fucking devil. You're literally like the devil. What is going on with you right now? You know what I mean? Yeah. Does that make sense?
So we went on a double date last night, and this conversation was brought up. A girlfriend of mine, Taryn, she just wrote a post about her and her husband. And it was basically like they've grown so much. I love them so much. But she was talking about, their wars and they've been married for 10 years. And her toxic traits, right? She was just really speaking about her, not about them necessarily. But she said, and in there, she said, and I have the dent in the pot, crock pot to prove it, where she kicked the crock pot across the room. And when I read it, my knee-jerk reaction was to be so proud of her, because those are the messages that so very few people are willing to admit.
Right.
You have these other people that are leading and they're like, oh, well, you should, all these other coaches or all these other people, they act like their relationships are great. But, it's like, where's the power? Is the power in being vulnerable and connecting with people's humanness to humanness? Because that to me is like, I love when people are real. So when I read Taryn's post, I'm like, that's dope, because I know that's real for her. I know there's so much growth in their marriage, and the fact that she can just even have this she can just talk about that, and that's like with me, when we were going through our stuff, it's like, I am very okay to share with people how incredibly far I had my head up my rear end, being so caught up that I was so much better than Sean. And really all it came down to is my ego was trying so very hard to protect me, because that's what that sweet ego of ours does, that very much gets us into trouble and complicates things. It doesn't need complication because it's just trying to keep you safe, right? And when I really stepped back from that and I'm like, oh, okay, I see this. Like, I need to just own the fact that Saxony, like, girl, you've got some fucked up traits. So does your husband. But, you know, if you want to be loved, and this is my self-talk, is like, if you want to be loved on your worst day, then maybe it's worth loving him on his worst day. You know? And that to me was just like, it like literally, I almost broke my own heart, because I do love you so much. And I always loved you, even in the thick of it. I loved you so much. And it was like, it was devastating to think that like we weren't going to be able to make it through this. But what I learned in the end is that was the growth that I had to go through, to the point where all I could sit with was my own bullshit against what I really wanted. And it's like, what was I going to choose? Own my bullshit, really look at it. And it doesn't matter if 2% of it was mine and 98% of it was his fault. I still have 2%. It doesn't matter if it's 50-50. Like, it's the fact that I have ownership. We all have some contribution to whatever we're stuck in, right? And it was very easy for me to validate that I was the better person, or that because maybe I'm not as loud or I'm not as aggressive. Well, I'm still got my I still have.
Dude, we went down the rabbit hole on that so many times.
Yeah, and it has been the most. But what I learned too, and Jeremy brought this up, is everything comes back to self-love. Right. Like the world we live in is a mirror of how we view ourselves. So if I'm triggered or I can't tolerate when you are acting a way that I don't like, it's truly a reflection of the fact that I don't find myself lovable in that same state. And so it's aggravating my demons, or whatever, not really demons, but it's like it aggravates those sore spots, the darkness inside of me, where I have shame and I have wounding and I have false stories that I've learned somewhere along my path that most of the time we're completely unconscious of them until they come to be. And then it's like, oh my gosh, this really has nothing to do with Sean. Like, it's that I'm terrified of those parts of me.
Dude, and what's funny is
I don't have demons.
I'm not. We'll do another episode on that later. Define demons really quick. I want to say something to this, because this has been a real eye-opening thing for me, right? I like to think of myself as that masculine man. I don't like the word alpha. I'm not really sure what that means, right? But I consider myself a producer, a protector, a provider of my family. I consider myself somebody who's out there who could, hey, drop me in the middle of the woods, I'll fucking take care of shit, kind of a deal. And I say that with a lot of pride and a lot of, confidence, right? Yeah. And so I think a lot of men that look at me and where I am, like, it's not an issue of I want to be this guy. It's kind of like, hey, I want to have the freedom and the confidence. And I say that with a lot of respect, because I was not a man who had confidence and was not free for a vast majority of my life. Sure. And I'm still not where I envision myself being, but I feel like I'm a little bit further along than a lot of other people in this conversation, specifically with my marriage. And I want to share this because what Sax was just saying about the whole ego thing and her looking at her own shit. What's fascinating for me over the last, when we went, balls deep into our stuff a year ago, that was always my go-to. My go-to was, I'm this loud, obnoxious dude, like the bull in the china shop. Nobody's ever going to fucking love me for that. Nobody's ever going to accept that. And that became part of my story. So where your story was, hey, he's an asshole, and you had to kind of turn and go, oh, wait a second, I've got my own shit. The same story was true for me. I went right back into my validation, into my scarcity of like, look, everybody's always told me, sit down, quiet down, slow down. I'm not lovable for me being me. And in the same way that you had to stop and look at that, I had to look at it. And the truth of the matter is that I wasn't confident. I didn't have that compassion for myself to be like, hey man, you're going to judge yourself more than anybody else is going to judge you. You've seen that. I mean,
sure.
I'm typically a write it and ship it guy. Like all of my biggest posts, all of the stuff that typically I find goes the furthest and has the most connection is when I'm just like, I black out, I write these words and just ship it kind of a thing. But there are times where it's like, I'm radically insecure with what I'm saying, and knowing where I am emotionally in my life. I'm insecure with you. I'm insecure with my sex life. I'm insecure with how I look, how I feel. Like, you know what I mean?
You're human?
Yeah, because I'm human. But I'm really intrigued by this conversation for us, because what you struggle with is one of the biggest like indicators of my triggers. We basically trigger, like if you have these doors, right? And there's kind of the little doors and then the big doors. You and I don't really fuck with each other in these little doors. Our shit goes straight to the big doors. Yeah. Meaning when you go down into your shit, it triggers my deepest, darkest stuff, and vice versa. Yeah. Right. And I feel like that's something that as we evolve our relationship and we grow, we're becoming more and more aware of it, which I did a post about this the other day, guys. And it's really interesting because so as we're looking at this humanness, we're trying to be the best version of ourselves and not really loving our insecurities or our fears or any of this other stuff.
Or our failures,
yeah,
quote unquote.
But that's actually what's refining us.
Yeah.
These are the holes in the game and those blind spots that once you become aware of them, you shine light in there, and they're no longer blind spots. But yet we're in this world and this lens, like I was talking about, where we don't want to talk about it, see it, look at it, because it's vulnerable or it's this or it's that, it's whatever else. And I said this the other day, I feel like our relationship is more connected because we're willing to be quote unquote unsafe.
Yes.
And I think that's a massive, I know that's a massive thing that I missed most of my life, is I kept so protected and so bundled up and not wanting to be human and trying to alter my words and my way of being and my fears and all of this other shit, to the point where I was completely out in left field and didn't know myself, love myself, give a shit like enough to actually address this. And so I just kept these blind spots, and I played safe, quote unquote safe, by holding back, by protecting myself. And I truly believe the reason that you and I are building, it's weird, man. You and I are not going to get divorced.
There's no way.
You know what I'm saying? It's just, it's not going to happen. And I know people look at that and go, well, give it 10 years. And when she stops fucking you, and then, and you can say whatever the fuck you want. Right. But none of you has a crystal ball. None of you motherfuckers listening to this right now. And so I really think that there's a real fucking, like a source of power in that knowledge, right? Where a lot of couples and a lot of relationships that we know are literally, it's like you're sitting on the teeter-totter and you're not sure what the fuck is going to happen, and if this person's going to be here or not be here, or leave her or leave him, or bounce and start banging the pool boy or the secretary or whatever. And there's so much of that uncertainty that never actually gives you the opportunity to build something big and build something safe.
And that's the dance. It's truly a dance. I'm a firm believer that God, life, however it works out, is you are matched up with the person that's going to bring out all of that. Yep. They're going to kick in all the big doors,
the
right?
big doors.
Because that's your gift in your partner. That's the true treasure. And a lot of people that I've friends, I've been in relationships like this, it's like, they even knock on that door and you're like, oh, nope.
Fuck that shit.
Yep. And you're out. It's like, we're not playing.
Well, then you find all the reasons where they're like, she's like my ex. He's like this. And then you literally go back into
toxic.
that. Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
You go right into that karmic loop.
Yeah. And it's that way of being, it's I can't think of the word right now, but it's basically like, I'm just going to turn and not look at that. But and this is why we are very certain that like, we're never getting divorced, because once you've started that dance where it's like, I just kicked in that door and I'm not leaving, and it's whoa, all this stuff, but once the door's open and once we've both hung out in that room, it's like, that's not a scary space anymore. Right. And it's like it's like clearing out these cobwebs of areas that you've never wanted to go. You've never even, sometimes you don't even know exist until that happens. Right. And once you start doing it, you realize you're like, this is me, is I've realized that Sean loves me so much that we've gone to enough of these spaces that I probably think are 10,000 times worse than they actually are, because that's how our shame works. That's how all of our, like, you know, our little inner child stuff. It's like, it seems like this big thing, but in all reality, it's not. It's just the wound hurts so much, right? Or the shame is so much. And as we start opening these doors and you realize you're like, oh, this is my journey partner. Like we're going through this process together, and you realize that, oh my God. And then it's like, oh, and of course every new door is just as painful. But
talk about that for a second, because I think a lot of people think, oh, it just gets easier and easier and easier.
No.
I don't think that it does. I think it's just like lifting weights. You become stronger.
Yeah.
But in this conversation, I feel like it's an awareness.
Sure.
I feel like when you kick that door open, you and I have both done this dance enough to where we're like, yo, okay, this is a big one. And maybe it's how you show up. And I really want to emphasize this on the humanness. It's kind of going back to what we were talking about at the beginning. When you go into that space, you've become more aware of it, right? Now you still freak the fuck out and you act like a total idiot, just like me, right? I say stuff, I do stuff, I'm ways that I don't want to be, that I'm not in a normal circumstance. But I really, truly love the fact that we're in a place of grace and empathy, to where there's like the foundation is here. I'm not going anywhere. Now, this might be a bigger war than normal. This might be a bigger door. You might show up like, and you're just an absolute raging fucking lunatic. This might be a little bit longer than normal or shorter than normal. But I feel like the more that I can hold space for that, it creates more safety. And this is what I want people to really understand is like, let's just assume you've been married for 15 years. You guys are roommates, you're partners. You're like, she's this, he's this. You know each other's buttons, man. You know how each other operates. You know what works and what doesn't work. You know how they're going to show up when you talk about sex, or when you talk about money, or when you talk about kids, or whether you talk about whether you want lasagna or fucking spaghetti or whatever. Sure. You just know these. You know the person so well from a very superficial front, kind of face-to-face space, right? But here's what's dope about this is like, I truly believe if you're going to be with somebody, this is that depth that people want. Yeah. They want to be seen. You want to feel safe. Dudes want to literally be able to be the giant fucking baby that they are, that we are sometimes. The 2-year-old who just wants mom to come in and fucking tickle him and love him. And we want to be able to throw our temper tantrum and know that, you know, we're not going to get kicked out of the house and mom's going to disappear and we're never going to have dinner again. We want to be able to throw our temper tantrum and kind of walk up to the dinner table and have mom there and dad there and be like, let's just keep going with our day, right? Yeah. And vice versa. And I think what's really fucking powerful as a grown adult, you and I dancing this dance together, is the things that we avoided for so long, those doors that we didn't want to open, are actually the greatest source of our power. 1,000%. It's the greatest source of our connection. It's the greatest source of our union. And when you get to a place where you can truly hold space for somebody, you have the love and compassion of their humanness.
Because when you're holding space, sometimes they're triggering everything 100%. In you that makes you want to bounce. Yeah. And that's when you even grow. That's depth in like me. I know I'm a better.
That's a clip right there.
I know I'm a better wife than I've ever been.
Yeah.
Each day forward, because I know that my ability to stand in places where I'm highly uncomfortable and very, like, everything in me wants to bounce.
Right.
Like when you can stand in that fire and hold space and love them through all of their ugliness, it's like that's where the magic happens. Because
talk about this though. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want you to go deeper on this exact point, because there's a difference between loving people for their humanness. And a lot of the feedback that we get when we hear that is, well, she's a bitch, or he's an asshole, or it's quote unquote toxic, or it's destructive. Talk about that for a second, because I think there's a really powerful space that you and I have both walked into where a lot of times I look at your shit and I'm like, yo, this is fucking unhealthy. We use that word a lot.
For sure.
You say that me going down my rabbit hole and wanting to burn my world to the ground is unhealthy. And I look at the same thing with you and say it's unhealthy. But talk about that for a second, because a lot of this stuff, it's not toxic and it's not unhealthy. There's antics and things that we go through that are very easily labeled by weak-minded people as this or this or this. You should never have to deal with this in your relationship, and you should never have raised voices or anything like that. Get the fuck out of here. But will you talk about that for a second, about when you just said loving somebody for where they are and their humanness and their ugliness? Really help people understand what that looks like, because I think that you and I are doing a much better job in our relationship of accepting that and understanding what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, you know, our relationship is a healthy one as a whole, right? We're not, there's no abuse in our relationship. There's none of this stuff that, like, you know, would fall into the category of toxic or all of those things you just mentioned. But to me, it's like, ugly is ugly. Like, when you're going through something that's like really, really, really like in deep down in your darkness, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. Like, you know, you talk about these women who open up they start working on their feminine energy, and all of a sudden they have so much rage. Well, guess what? That's part of it. Like, and if she's going to keep that rage hidden, well, then you can't go any higher than you go deep, right? And that depth requires a lot of uncomfortable moments. Now with us is we have a commitment to growth. So that's like the baseline of everything. So when we have things come up, we both know that we have a commitment to growth. Those moments lead to growth. It's not like I'm just going to throw a temper tantrum for the sake of getting attention, or, you know, but we know in our relationship that if we're going through some shit, we both have full confidence that the other person and ourselves are on a mission to grow.
Right.
And so when those hard moments come up, we can stand in that uncomfortable. We can be, it's like, this is, you know, sometimes it's elevated. Sometimes it's really ugly. And what's beautiful though is it's 99% of the time, it's never about what's happening in the moment. Right. And we hear it and we see memes about it all the time on Instagram, but it's true.
Right.
You can hear what your partner will say sometimes, because we do this. I'll listen to him and I'm like, what he just said has literally nothing to do with right now. What he just said is he shared where his wound came from. And I don't even think he knew he did it. And it's like that slowing down to really realize that, like, oh, this has nothing to do, because I used to defend, like, every word he would say. I'd be like, well, that's not even true. Well, that's not. And I finally realized, I'm like, Saxony, he's just literally reliving, as we all do in those moments. We're reliving something somewhere else, where this is why Dr. Joe Dispenza does the whole, you know, brain rewiring. Is it defaults you back to that time when this feeling, if it's abandonment, whatever, that's where it came from. Yep. And you being that different partner where they can process through that and realize that what happened then is not what happens now, and that's where growth happens. Yep. But that's ugly.
Well, that's what I wanted you to say, because as we've shared our story over and over and over again, a lot of the feedback that we get from people is, you know, you don't deserve this, or they shouldn't act like this or be like this. And there's a really interesting dance in that conversation, because we live in a world now where me being me, I've been labeled a narcissist for years and years and years and years, right? Mm-hmm. Now, unless you're a fucking doctor and you have literally studied me and done neurological, psychological tests, you can't label somebody a narcissist off of a Facebook post or an Instagram post or your generalities of how they open the door but that's my point, is we're living in this world where people are so fucking afraid of their humanness. I'm an animated dude. We got tattoos last night, and as I'm talking, I'm just sitting there talking, and my hand's moving. She got to stop moving. I'm like, I'm not moving my arm. My arm you're tattooing is still, but I'm over here. That's who I am and what I am. And so when I go into that space and it's elevated, I think a lot of people would say my animation, like you and I get into this war all the time. And I say war, very frequently, I'm trying to see how I'm doing with my words. I'm picking my words very carefully here, but I'm thinking about them. Frequently, you tell me that I yell at you. Mm-hmm. Frequently, you tell me you're yelling at me. Mm-hmm. And what do I say?
I'm not yelling
I'm
at
not
you.
fucking yelling. I'm like, you haven't heard me yell at you because I don't yell at you, right? But this is that dance, because when I get into my passion, whether it's the light or the dark, and you've seen me when I'm excited as fuck, I'm like, I'm in the same vibration and frequency and audible. Like I'm speaking the same way when I'm like jacked out of my mind and we're racing and I pass the guy and I'm excited and as I am when I'm like, no, fuck you, this is bullshit, right? And so what's interesting is as we're going through this dance, this is what I pray people really hear is like, you've got to step back from what you think you know in your own ego of what you're experiencing with this person, right? Sax has said to me countless times in our relationship, that's not true, that's a lie, that's right?
A story.
That's a story. And dude, that would elevate me and send, because I'm like, no, this isn't a story, this is real for me. How I feel right now is not a fucking story. How I feel right now is very, very relevant and it matters, right? And this is that really fun, I don't say fun, it's fun. I mean, look, we're growing. Growth is fun.
Educational.
It's very educational. It's fucking hard as shit. It's very, very difficult. But when you're in a really unhealthy place, and I think a good way to help people identify this, when you're in an unhealthy place, you're constantly labeling things like this is toxic, this is abuse, this is bad. You know, me being elevated to some people would be like, how the fuck can you handle that guy? Like, you know.
I want to interject right here. Okay, so my upbringing was, we were passive aggressive. We'll like, you know, like our toxic stuff is like, we'll just kind of like talk shit behind your back, but then like it was very passive aggressive, right? Because I have a whole family that all of my family, they don't like we don't like conflict, we don't like confrontation, but we'll talk some mad shit behind your back. And I was totally a participant in this until I really saw it. But then the irony is, then I get in this relationship with a guy who's like straight to the face.
We're gonna fucking address this right now.
And I'm like, oh, this is too much. And so I was in the very beginning was like, you shouldn't, because I'm basing it on my level of bullshit that I'm used to.
Tell everybody
when we have conflict, it should look like this.
Yeah, you labeled me everything. You said that, and this is real. Like we're in a way different.
You everything. That's very aggressive.
Name the adjective, and you probably label. I'm saying this with a lot of love and respect. Like this is our growth in our early days. You said that I was abusing you. You said that I was verbally abusive. You said that I was a narcissist. There were a lot of things thrown out there. And I'm sharing this because I want people to understand our humanness, right? Those were things that when you got triggered and you went into your space, that was a reaction and a thought process. And I'm sharing this because over the last year and a half of our evolution and our growth, that doesn't happen anymore. Those labels aren't there and those words aren't there. And I want people to understand that came from you and I going significantly deeper into our own shit is you started to realize like, no, this isn't a story.
Right.
This is Sean's reality. This isn't abuse. He's just fucking animated and he's loud. And when he gets passionate about something, light or dark, this is how this motherfucker shows up.
Yeah.
And having been in a place where you've been in the opposite, the passive aggressive, whatever, it's really easy to go, oh, he's verbally abusing me because he's speaking like this. Well, and this is what
it's more of like we've moved closer together.
Yes.
Because you have been really good at controlling how
it's learning to communicate. Right.
How elevated you get to where we're coming together and like you're bringing it down a little bit. And I'm definitely like, because it used to almost like shock my nervous system. Right. It was so foreign. It was so foreign to me. But now, like, it doesn't at all. And it's not that, how do I say this? It's like we just have literally come closer in the fact, and come closer together in the fact that we're like working together. Right. But back to why I said in the beginning is the whole, well, it should look like this it's like I was basing, and I think a lot of people will base what they think is normal or healthy or whatever based on their experience. Yeah. But I was basing it on the fact that I'm used to passive aggressiveness because nobody wanted to get into conflict. But I feel like almost that was, in hindsight, that was probably more toxic than a family that's willing to just tell you to your face how they feel. And I'm like, that's pretty gangster, actually. Yeah. Now I'm like, I respect that.
Yeah. And this is really important in this conversation. I believe that it is, because there's a million books out there. There's a million therapists. There's a million people. You could Google the shit out of this,
sure.
right? And what I pray people understand, like through this conversation, like with you and I, is that we've gone down into what a lot of people would probably consider radically unhealthy, this, that, or the other, would label it a lot of different things, but it's actually been the process that we've had to go through. And so if you're listening to this and you've been married a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and you're all of a sudden going, all right, you know what? We want the next level. Like, let's go to the next level. I'm hearing what Sean and Sax are saying. I'm hearing what you guys are talking about. Let him have his temper tantrums. She can show up and be a crazy fucking psychotic bitch, da-da-da-da, this whole thing. It's really, really, really powerful, and it's really important to understand that, like, if you have these foundational principles of saying, well, I'm not going anywhere, and you decide to start opening these doors, my suggestion to you is to really learn to take away all of these lenses and these words and these things, because I want all of you, right? And I know that you want all of me.
Yeah.
And when you become elevated in this level of consciousness and thought process, I don't hate, but some of these words are just fucking ridiculous. As you evolve and want more together, collectively, individually, right? There's going to be things that show up that there are no rule books for.
Amen.
I don't know
true.
your real deep, dark, nasty, hidden, scared little girl.
And a lot of people don't know that in themselves, and that's why they're scared to go there.
But that's where what we retreat to, we as human beings retreat to. Whoa, wait a second. He's totally raising his voice. This is fucking verbal abuse. No, you've never had anybody that's taken on conflict, bam, like two fucking buses colliding.
It's true.
And
so
that's
true.
very natural for your spidey senses, your fear, your red flags to go, fuck this shit. This is bad and wrong. I'm out. And now the evolution of our shit, and it's the same thing with you, right? Yeah. I would instantly go to, she's gone, she's out. She can't handle me. She can't handle who I am.
Because I was doing that, though. That was my toxic traits. I was like, all right, peace.
Yeah,
I'm out. I'm gonna
Which
go
then triggered me.
Yeah,
going,
I was like, I don't want to deal with this. I'm gonna go to the park for the whole day. I'm gonna go sit at my mom's and not. Right. I don't want to deal with this.
Right, and it's a really beautiful dance, but it's also, in my personal opinion, it's how two people really, really, really start to build big shit. And I'm not just talking about big business or this and the other, but it's how two human beings can become deeply, deeply, deeply connected. You know what I'm saying? And I really believe, if you're listening to this podcast, that tells me something about you. Like, either you're entertained by our antics, and it's just like watching these two whack jobs fucking talk, and that's fine. That's totally fine. Just make sure you go leave us a 5-star review, because we're really good at that. But on the flip side of that, I also feel like if you're listening to this, like, you want something more, and I'd like to believe that. And if that's real, this conversation and this reality, in my opinion, from what I see in coaching thousands of people, what you really see being at the root of divorce is this level of acceptance of somebody else's humanness, but really accepting your own humanness. Because I don't shy away from the fact that I'm a 44-year-old dude. I'll go up in the mountains and fucking kill an elk and drag it home and cut it up and feed my family. But then at the same time, there's days where I just want to lay on the couch and have you tickle my head and just like snuggle me and just tell me that I'm cool and that you're proud of me and all of these other things. It's very real. Right. It's very, very, very real. And I'm really stoked for us to be where we are and to be willing to have these conversations, not only privately, but publicly, because it's a really powerful experience right now for a lot of people to step into this bigger game. And I think right now, most couples would agree that there's a war on the family. There's a war on couples. There's a war on, there's a war on chivalry. There's a war on monogamy. There's like everything that is, I don't want to say everything, but a lot of really bright lights and really beautiful things. There's a war on that for a reason. There's a lot of thought process around, well, I've been with her for 20 years. We're never going to get there. That's a fucking terrible idea. That's a terrible reality. She's always been like this. It's always been like this. This is how they've always done it. This is how we've always done it. if you want to step into a bigger game, it's going to require a bigger human being. It's going to require a much broader, bigger bucket for you to hold somebody else's shit,
right.
for you to be able to hold your own shit, for you to be able to acknowledge your own shit. Most men are not willing to acknowledge their own shit. Most men are not willing to acknowledge the boy and the man. Most men are not even remotely close to wanting to look into that feminine aspect of who they are and the nurture and the nature. They just want to keep banging on their chest, making money and fucking. You know what I'm saying? But that's the beautiful dance is like, dude, there's this reality that you and I are talking about is significantly more profitable for our businesses. Mm-hmm. It's more connected and look, go to the primal levels of things. We have way more sex here than we do if we're playing small. We make way more money here than if we're both living in two different fucking la-la lands of fear and whatever. We have way more fucking fun here, being all in, having these conversations, being willing to have grace and empathy for the other person's humanness, you know, and it's just an all-around healthier experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and one of the big reasons I wanted to talk about this is I am blessed, Sean and I are blessed with other couples that have been in the game longer, right? They've had longer marriages. Frank and Chanel, Taryn and Jeremy, like, and these are couples that even 10, 30 something years in, they still are doing the same thing. And
what's the same thing though? Explain the same
processing
thing.
Through their darkness, their humanness, things come up, like
they're still opening doors to shit.
They're still opening doors. Right. And these beautiful connections that I have given me permission in my marriage to really be braver, to be more like connected. I see their humanness. They're open with their humanness. We have conversations. Like, I don't see their perfection. They don't claim perfection, but I see how beautiful and how much they're growing. And me wanting to talk with our tribe on this podcast about this is maybe you guys don't have that.
Right.
That couple or that permission, right? Because that's all.
A lot of us don't, man. A lot of us have not had great examples of solid people and solid marriages. Yeah,
that's why I really want to be. If you need that permission to, like, oh, you're in this and like you feel like, you know, is this horrible? Is my marriage horrible because of this? Because you don't have anybody that's willing to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there you go. Because it is. And these are couples like that I just talked about. And there's more, but they're ones that I absolutely love. Yeah. I love their relationships. I love them as individuals. I love the work they do. I love that they are so in it and they're just so willing to grow and persevere, and they have so much tenacity and they just keep wanting more together. But they're both of those couples will go through, like, go read Taryn's post, right? Oh, yeah. You know, it's like, go read Frank and Chanel's post. They talk about this stuff. They're willing to be honest and authentic with, like, we are human. It is messy. It's beautiful, but it's also messy.
One of the things that, as you were saying that I think is really important, like, is those two couples that you mentioned. You know, you could throw, like, you know, Ryan and Amy in the mix, and there's just other couples that I know, that we know, that are in this space. And if you look at kind of the singular thread of commonality between them, one of them is that they're not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And as we were talking with Jeremy and Taryn last night, that was something that I acknowledge and resonate and see in their reality. They're like, we're not going anywhere. I might not like you. Frank and Chanel. How long they've been married? 30 something years. I mean, they were high school sweethearts. They were younger.
Yeah. They've literally been, she's 14 when they started hanging out.
Yeah. They've known each other for a long fucking time.
5 kids. Yeah. They're in it.
But what's really cool, and I think this is a kind of a kickoff point for a lot of people, a launching pad. How do we do this? What do we do? Like, I really love to leave people with insight and knowledge and how, okay, this sounds great, but my husband's an asshole. My wife's a bitch. You don't know our story. I don't fucking need to know your story. No, It doesn't matter, really. It truly doesn't matter. Your past doesn't matter. Your husband or wife's family, no matter how neurotic, psychotic, insane they really are, that doesn't fucking matter.
None of us are as unique as we think we are.
No, like, I promise you, man, all of the things that you would say, well, this sounds really good, Sax and Sean, but you don't know, or this sounds great for you, but I want people to really realize that if you're all in with your person, and you want to just start with that, how do we start this process? How do we start ripping ourselves open? How do I start looking at my husband with more grace and more empathy? How do I start handling, my wife with more grace and more empathy? Make that declaration that you're not going anywhere. Yep. And you might be married for 20 years and go, that's just a given. I promise you it's not. Mm-mm. It's not. Believe it or not, it's not. How many times, just case in point, I don't need to do this, right? Because we're married. Technically, we got a piece of paper, blah, 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 blah. How many times would you say, is it a frequent occurrence that I text you and I say, hey, I'm not going anywhere? Often. Especially in our wars. I'm often. Good. Like, and I want to rage. I want to be mad. I want whatever. That constant reassurance, and not that we need it or have to have it, because I know subconsciously, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not cheating on you. I'm not going to. And I know the same thing. Like, I people can laugh and mock and say, well, yeah, you guys are, I believe that in my fucking DNA, in my soul, right?
That's the difference between people with discernment in their beliefs and in their values and not.
And this is where I truly believe a lot of people want to get to in marriage. I mean, look, again, it's math. Half of the marriages on planet Earth or in the United States or whatever have either ended in divorce or will end in divorce. That's just it's just math, right? I truly believe this is kind of that kickoff point, that starting point, a really good place for people who might struggle with this or want to elevate this or want to go, is to just have that deeply rooted connection with your partner. Like, I'm not going anywhere. You could be the biggest fucking bitch on the planet. You could come home and be the biggest asshole on the planet. I'm not going anywhere. I might not like you. I might not like the antics. I might not like the show. I might not like all your boo-hoo-hoo, your tears, your things, whatever. I might not like the fact that you kick the fucking crock pot. I might not like the fact that you fucking take off and go sit under a goddamn tree all day long.
That's my kicking a crock pot.
I might not like the fact that, like, I go fucking crazy and just become an absolute lunatic, losing all like connection to what's right in front of me, but I'm not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? There's a lot of fucking power in that, man. And I know, speaking from a man, as a man, that's hugely important to me. Because I didn't grow up with that. I didn't grow up with the confidence of having my dad around. My dad was in and out and in and out and in and out and in and out. And I mean, he was so emotionally detached from love and connection and support and compassion with anybody in our family. I didn't grow up with that. And so I feel really passionately right now about that being our, if you came to me and said, Sean, what's the thing? Like, what's the thing that keeps you two going? What's the thing that keeps you guys? And you'll get funny answers from me, sex, and she, blah, blah, blah. It's the fact that I know for me, I'm not going anywhere. And I believe with no reservation that you're not going anywhere. Yeah. I might think something different one day or say something different one day or lash out and whatever, but I know that. And I think if people start there and truly look at your person, look at yourself, truly look in your own fucking soul. Am I going to leave this person? Am I really going to cheat? Is the grass really get raw? Is it really greener someplace else? Do I really trust this person? Like, would I fucking put a bullet in somebody? Would I cut somebody for this person? Like, would I burn everything down for this person? Would I do that for myself? I feel like you start there, man, and you get to a place where you become fiercely fucking connected to yourself, to loving who you are, to loving your person. I think you can build anything from that place. You can rebuild sex. You can rebuild connection. You can rebuild money. You can rebuild trust. You can rebuild anything. And not just rebuild, but build bigger, build deeper, build significantly past what you would ever fathom. If you plant your fucking flag and be like, I am all in with this person. I am not leaving. I will be here. True. Without saying, well, we'll see. You say we'll see, you're already fucked. You say we'll see, you're already fucked. Yeah. If you say, well, I'll give it a year, you're fucked. I'm just telling you right now, you might as well just bounce now. If your mentality, your thought process is, well, I'm not sure, that's on you, motherfucker. That's on you. That ain't, if I show up and say, I'm not really sure, that's on me. That says way more about me than my partner. And I don't give a fuck what you've said or what you've done. This is the extreme ownership conversation. Right. You plant your fucking flag and be like, I'm all in with this person. We've talked about this on the podcast many times.
And I want to you just reminded me of something, is the more you love this is what I've found, is the more that I love Sean unconditionally, that is filled my self-love cup of unconditional love for myself. Because what I've realized, like, it's such a dance. Like, the more I love you unconditionally, the more it almost grows, like, it's like the Grinch heart, you know, it just keeps growing. That's what I've shown to me, is like, I'm like, dang, the more that I am like here, that I'm not going anywhere. That's reflected so much beauty onto myself. I'm like, I feel so much better about myself because I'm that woman.
Yep.
I'm that wife. Like, I am that person, like, that I want to be with. And it's like, it fills my own cups, and it's not even selfish. It's just the way it works, you know? And
it's
often,
empowering, man.
It is, because you realize you're building your own character. You're not letting yourself slip and be half-assed, you know? It's like, you really realize, like, I'm awesome. Like, I'm really here for this person. And it's so reciprocal.
Yeah.
But one thing is that our coach said something, and he said, every single person has narcissistic traits because we are out to protect and persevere for ourselves. So remember that when you're like, oh, well, they're a narcissist. You are too, sister. And so is he, and so is he. And it's not that you're a narcissist, just like you're not an asshole, but you're sure acting like an asshole. Big difference, right?
Big shout out to Matt Townsend. If you guys haven't read his book, go get his book.
Starved Stuff.
Brilliant, without question, the best relationship book I've ever read. That guy breaks it down in ways that, look, if I can understand it, then anybody can understand it.
Yeah,
right?
but that was huge for me, because I found myself very, very judgy, because I judged myself so incredibly harshly the majority of my life. I'm a recovering perfectionist and totally disassociated with most connection of my life in my life, you know, for the first 30 years of it. So I'm very aware of that. So when he said that, I was like, damn,
that's some humble pie. I'll eat it. I'll take an extra slice of that.
But you know, he makes it just so basic. I was like, it's true.
Yeah, this is why, I mean, people always show up on social media and like, oh, my ex is a narcissist and this, or you're a narcissist, Sean. I'm just like, dude, you're so fucking full of your own shit right now that you actually have the audacity to label somebody something that you know nothing about. Well, I read an article one time. All my girlfriends say it. It's like, no, dude, you're an idiot. Like, why don't you start looking in the mirror instead of labeling everybody something else? Like, it's a real humbling thing, but unless you've got, I want to finish with this, and then you can bring us home, babe. Like, I truly have found in our relationship and our marriage, like, the more I open up and give you, like, the stronger our relationship gets. And the thing that has held me back most in my life is the willingness to just give somebody everything. We've talked about this. I talk about this all the time on social media, and I post about this, and people might believe me, not believe me, whatever. What we're doing, guys, is literally we're harming ourselves. We're keeping ourselves slaves. We're keeping ourselves literally slaves to our past and to our fears by not doing the single thing that overcomes that, which is the scariest shit you can do. It's just such a vicious cycle, but it's like when you become truly free, you're willing to play all in. You're willing to give your partner everything. The keys to the doors and the swords to cut you. Like, I'm giving you everything. You've got the keys to open it all up, lock it back up. You got the sword to fucking cut my heart out, right? And that's a really powerful place to be. A lot of people think that's weakness, that's vulnerable. I could get hurt. You could go do something else, but I'm so deeply rooted in my confidence and my desire for more that I have two choices: sit on the fucking fence and go, well, she might bang the neighbor. She might be a fucking raging lunatic. She might take all my money and whatever. Or I can be like, no, this is the baddest bitch on the planet. And I'm building some big fucking shit. And she has my back. And she can fucking hold the sword and the key at the same time. And she will help me fucking hand me the sword when I got to go cut and hand me the keys when I got to open up some shit. Like, that's the most liberating, freeing, powerful place I believe a man can be.
That was great. And ended right there. Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else you want to share, babe?
No, I'm really grateful for where we've been. I'm grateful for how we can speak about it today. And I'm grateful that like we don't have any shame. Like I think a lot of people struggle with shame and where they've been or how they've behaved or how things have gone. And you know, there's no time for that. It's love your humanness. Love the people around you and their humanness. See them for that. Like it is their humanness. You know, we are all on this path to grow. Nobody got an instruction guide. Nobody, you know, it's like we step on other people's toes and it causes conflict in our lives and realizing that like we're all just trying to figure it out.
Yep.
And I don't think very people have really horrible intentions. I think that we just, you know, things collide.
Yeah.
And so having grace and empathy for others, especially when they hurt you or harm you or trigger you, like realize that you too are that villain somewhere in someone's story.
Having grace and empathy for yourself too.
Mm-hmm.
God bless.
That's all.
This was good.
Thanks, guys.
Good conversation. Great text last night, and way to start this conversation, love. Guys, if you know anybody that needs to hear this, please share it with them. Feel free to share, and then we would love to know what your thoughts are. Leave us a comment on YouTube or
and tag us on
iTunes
Instagram because I think that's where we're the most responsive.
I know a lot of you guys share this, so feel free to tag us, and we'd love to connect with you. So, anyways, till next time.
Okay, bye.
See you. Bye.
Love you.